Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How to Prepare for the Next Stage of AI and PR. My name is Eitan, and I'm the Communications Manager for Propel PRM. And today we have an incredible guest with us, joining us, Stephen Waddington from Wadds Inc. Stephen, how are you doing?
Thanks, Adrian. I'm very good. I'm delighted to be here. I'm joining you from the UK, where I work as a practitioner and management consultant, working with agencies and in-house teams. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. We are all too. And I'm calling from beautiful Tel Aviv, Israel, and we'd love to see where everyone else is calling in from. It's always great to see where in the world people are coming from and, see what type of reach we have. So if you want to drop that in the chat, that would be great as well. Yeah, so Stephen and I have been speaking quite a bit about how best to build this webinar. Really excited to be able to, give a great explanation of what we are dealing with in AI and trying to, demystify some of these buzzwords that we've been throwing around. You don't need to be an ad tech expert, it turns out, to completely understand AI. So while we're waiting for a few more minutes for more people to join in, we have a poll really quickly. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for AI in PR as the tech is further integrated into our workflows? So the the answers are ensuring privacy concerns are addressed, making outputs less robotic, figuring out how to incorporate it into workflows in general, or ensuring that outputs aren't hallucinations. And if you don't know what a hallucination is, well, you came to the right place because we're going to be talking all about that. So Stephen, what would your answer be?
I've just got the pop-up over here. It says, as a panelist, you can't vote. There's a range here, isn't there? And I think all these are issues. I think there's a huge enthusiasm, or there was initially a huge enthusiasm to leap into these technologies, as there is with the advent of any new technology. And I think we didn't think about the first issue, the privacy concerns. Those are starting to be addressed both from a governance perspective and a vendor perspective. I think the last one is also an issue, and as practitioners has got us to recognise, made us realise we need to, incorporate fact checking and as part of, and approvals as tighten up approvals as part of our processes. And then the question I get asked all the time is, where do I use it? How do I use it? And I know we've had a bit of a warm up, haven't we, for the last half an hour or so? And that's, I think, where I'd like to focus some of the conversation today, because I think that's the most biggest issue for practitioners for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's a newer technology, and we're also going to talk a little bit about why people might be hesitant to adopt it. But just even being able to envision where it goes is a major step in adopting it. All right, so let's give everyone about another minute to answer. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about specifically what does that mean, making outputs less robotic. How does this tech work on a granular level, and I'm excited to talk about how it works just in plain English. I feel like that there aren't enough resources, even on YouTube, that explain what's going on behind the scenes in English that you don't need to be a data scientist to understand. All right, so let's end the poll really quickly. And it looks like actually making outputs less robotic is what 35% of people believe is going to be the biggest challenge for AI and PR. Figuring out where to incorporate it into workflows in general, actually, believe it or not, is one of the lower ones, the lowest one. So that's really interesting to see. So I think that already means that people kind of have an idea of, what it can do for them. And hopefully, with this, they'll be able to even have a better understanding of how it works and what it can do for them as well. All right, so I'm just going to stop sharing really quickly and continue on. For those of you who joined a little bit late, I just want to reiterate, this is the webinar, How to Prepare for the Next Stage in AI and PR. And again, we're very happy and very thankful for our guest, Stephen Waddington, the founder and managing partner of Wadds Inc. Stephen is a business advisor and troubleshooter who helps organizations with planning, strategic decision-making, and execution. He's held the role of visiting professor in practice at Newcastle University since 2015 and is a PhD research student at Leeds Business School. Stephen is previously managing director at Media Group, an international digital marketing company where his clients included Amazon, BMW, Capita, Salesforce, and Microsoft. He was also chief engagement officer at Ketchum and has provided lead senior counsel on integrated global accounts, including IBM, IKEA, and Philips. He originally trained as an engineer and a journalist before following a career in public relations. He co-founded, managed, and sold to award-winning public relations agency, Rainier PR in 1998 and Speed in 2009. Stephen is a past president of the CIPR, chartered PR practitioner, a CIPR fellow, a member of the IOD, and a member of the IPRA. Is there anything else that I'm missing in this wonderful, incredible CV that we have? I mean, this is awesome.
No, it just speaks to the fact I've been in the industry for a long time and so collected badges and awards along the way. Thank you. Thanks. It's
so it
great
means
to
that
be
you know
here.
what you're talking about.
Well,
Yeah, and then meanwhile, I'm Eitan Goldstein, the communications manager for Propel. I use the platform every day to garner earned media coverage for the company. I previously worked at GKPR, one of the premier PR tech firms in Israel, where I represented companies from seed stage to Fortune 100. Before this, I was a senior editor at Ynet News, the English language edition of Israel's largest newspaper. So let's start jumping in. First, we're gonna talk about what we're gonna be talking about. So first of all, we're gonna be talking about some of these AI buzzwords. Try to shine a light on what does all this mean? What is machine learning? What is an LLM? And how to really to get a better understanding of what all these things are, so we could actually use them and know what to use and know what we don't need. Stephen, I think that we spoke a little bit about this previously, but I think even knowing what you don't need is just as important as knowing what you do need in order to put incorporate AI into your workflow. And we're going to be talking a lot about that coming forward. Next, we're going to be talking about understanding what is a data set and why is that even important. Next up, DE&I and AI, which, believe it or not, is something that's important and needs to be addressed. And then finally, generative AI, what challenges do these new technologies pose? And then finally, we're going to have a quick question and answer session. But before that, a very, very quick word about Propel. So it's the first PR tool built by PR people for PR people. Our CEO, Zach Cutler, founded in 2019 after running his own agency for about 9 years. In his agency years, Zach was always on the lookout for better technology to manage all of his agency's needs. Finding none that suited them, he decided to build the first CRM specifically for PR on the market. So he sold his agency and built Propel. Now we're on a mission to democratize and make PR tech accessible for the masses. We've launched many first-of-a-kind features for PR workflow, insights, and analytics. And we have the industry's only native Gmail and Outlook email pitch plugins, and Amiga, a generative AI tool for pitch and press release writing and media list building. So let's get to the webinar, finally. And I'm sure everyone is asking this question, but LLMs, ML, deep and shallow AI, deep learning, what does this all mean? What's the difference between all of this? And so, Stephen, I first wanted to ask you, AI, what is it? What is AI? A big question with a lot of answers.
Yeah, do you know what? So it's the technology developed and I know you've got a wonderful build here, so I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but it's a class of technologies where machines are able to apparently take on a human cognitive decision making, and it originates actually. We think it all started in November 2022 with the launch of ChatGPT by OpenAI. Not at all. This technology originated from computer science in the 1950s. And it's only come to the fore now, and it's actually been used in the public relations industry. In embedded applications, simplistic applications for the last 10 years or so, but it's come right to the fore because of this confluence of machine learning, large language models, huge big data sets, and natural language. And the three things have come together to have incredibly powerful and practical application. But you've got to Great chart. Why don't you share that?
Well, yeah, so it's exactly, like what Stephen said. There is so much that goes into AI. We have robots, just your typical robots that are working on an assembly line. AlphaGo, that the AI that beat a human being in the game of Go, the AIs that beat people in chess, and there's just so much more to just gen AI. Now, a subset of AI, just like robotics is a subset, AlphaGo and that type of thing is a subset. Another subset is machine learning. And I was wondering, Stephen, if you could share a few words on machine learning. What this particular subset of AI is.
So it's the ability of a machine to follow a language, a set of instructions. And I was writing code. I did a computer science at high school, and was writing code to train a machine to learn and follow instructions. And it's no more and no complex like than that. I think you speak to a point that the market is so cluttered at the moment with all these new terms and phrases, that making sense of it all is challenging for practitioners. But machine learning is just a class of AI, as you suggest.
Exactly. So yeah, just that's a way to think about machine learning. It is one of the types of AI. And now, just like to give some concrete examples of machine learning, so it's just not like a general theoretical phrase in our heads. Machine learning includes things such as decision trees, linear regression, and clustering. I mean, but what are these? What do these words mean? Basically, they're noises we make with our mouths. They're just gobbledygook to us for right now. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into what these things are. So, for instance, a decision tree. If you've ever been on the phone or using a chat bot, and there are maybe like 3 or 4 different options that you could go for. So you say, hi, let's say if you're in the United States, you have student loans, you're calling your student loan provider, and this is an example that happened to me last week, and you're trying to get through to get to the right section to pay off your student loan. So so the robot voice will ask you a question, you speak and answer, and then it'll kind of make the decision, okay, I'm gonna go to this section, and then ask another question based on that, keep going through the tree until you get to where you want. So something very simple, it's still processing what you're saying, but there are like a set number of different options that you could go to. Let's talk about a little bit linear regression. And the easiest way to think about this is weather. If you ever seen hurricane forecasts, cyclone forecasts, depending on where you are in the world, they've gotten super accurate. And why is that? And the reason is because the AIs, these machine learning algorithms, are feeding a ton of data are being fed a ton of previous data from previous hurricanes and cyclones. And so when there's a hurricane or cyclone today, the AI machine learning algorithm can predict with a higher degree of accuracy where and when it's going to make landfall. So that would be something linear regression, kind of like we're predicting the future, if you will. And then clustering. Clustering is, believe it or not, something that we know the most about because this is how we get targeted ads. The machine learning models for whatever social media you're using are going to kind of put you in a cluster and say, okay, this person is most likely to buy this product. For marketing, it could be, okay, this person is most likely going to be most open to being upselled on this particular package because of these previous determinants and this background knowledge that we have on them. So those are all different types of machine learning. Now, another type of machine learning is deep learning. Okay, so Stephen, if you want to talk a little bit about deep learning, if you could explain that a little bit more in detail, and if you have something to say, we'd all love to, hear that as well. Oh, you're on mute.
You'd think we would have learned by now, wouldn't you? So deep learning is where you take a large corpus of data and train a computer to act on that data. And this is where we get to the class of tools that we're currently concerned with relating to AI in public relations practice, large language models, and large language models that's seemingly have the ability to generate copy, but also reduce it. And so you can see interestingly, and I made the point that these technologies have been around for 10 or 15 years. AI has been around since the 1950s. It's seemingly jumped into the consciousness of practice because we've suddenly all got access to tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, Anthropic, via a web browser. It's been completely democratized. But the examples you describe, I'd say decision trees, pretty dumb use of AI, not very satisfactory from a customer perspective. As it's been used since the 1960s. Linear regression, really interesting case that is used a lot from a predictive perspective. It's built into a lot of the analytics and measurement tools we used in practice, especially from a predictive perspective. But it's really this particular class we're talking about now, the foundation models, large language models, that have brought this right to the fore.
Right. And so, that's really what we're talking about here is you have the foundation models that are a part of deep learning. Deep learning is a part of machine learning. Machine learning is a part of AI. And I think that's, if now that we understand this latter, I think we're all going to be able to think and describe what we want from AI much better. Now, I actually took this particular graph from a really great IBM sponsored video, and they talk about generative AI this way. So by the way, but besides LLMs, you also have video and audio foundation models. So the audio, of course, is how you make that brand new collaboration between Tupac and Elvis, and video being deepfakes, of course. But so generative AI is what is the term that is kind of how we use these foundation models. Specifically what IBM said, and I really like this definition. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Stephen. Generative AI models are specifically crafted to generate new content. They are the creative expression stemming from the knowledge base of the LLMs, video and audio foundation models. And I wanted to know, did you have any, what you think about that definition?
Yeah, it's spot on. I'd also say they have the capability to be reductive as well. So equally, they can work in one way and generate content. They can work in the other way and reverse it. So they're good for creating content based on large language model. Equally, they can act on a data set and summarize it. And that's an equally powerful application that I don't think we've necessarily considered.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that. So first of all, can you talk a little bit more about what did you say, regressive models?
Reductive
models. Sorry.
So so in public relations practice, a lot of the focus is on generative AI, and seemingly this magical ability to create content, using especially using first time you use a language model like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, being able to ask a question and have it come back with the first draft of pretty much anything. And it'll be low quality, but it gives you the basis to work from, and it solves that blank page problem. Equally, an application equally as powerful, arguably more powerful, is the use of reductive AI. So this is a application of generative AI where you provide a body of content, text, and ask it to extract key themes, key arguments, key topics, and create a bullet point list, summarize it, and so forth.
Oh, interesting. So awesome. So even I just added a new AI vocabulary to my repertoire here. So we've been talking a lot about generative AI and just how AI, where it fits in the hierarchy of AI. I wouldn't even say hierarchy, but just kind of where it fits within AI itself. And people do, as you mentioned before, they ask you a lot, where do you think that they can benefit the most from implementing generative AI into their workflows? So, first of all, I wanted to ask you that question, and then I wanted to get into, what types of generative AI you have seen work, be it wraps, homemade, and how those can either be different or how those can be melded together.
I think at the moment we're at the stage of experimentation still within practice, and there's two schools of thought there. There's deconstructing workflow to look where you can apply AI, either single use applications, and think there about we're recording this session, we could run off the transcript, use a tool like Otter or Files to extract key points, key themes, and create a good summary of it. From that, we could create draft blog posts, social media posts, and so forth. So there's that application where you look at workflow, and particularly where in your workflow you could start to use tools. Or there's another school of thought, and honestly, I think the view within the industry is polarized between these two perspectives at the moment, where you put a large language model like ChatGPT on the desk of everybody, and you say, go and see how you can use it. Challenge with that is you've got to get the governance right, you've got to get learning and development right, and you've got to put the guardrails in place to ensure they're used ethically and appropriately.
I'm really happy that you mentioned all that, because that actually feeds really well into the next subject that we have, which is understanding what a data set is, data sets, guardrails. I mean, I like to call, if you're going to compare AI to a child or to a human being, it's only going to be as good as what you train it on. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about those concepts, about data sets and about guardrails and things like that. So the first question is, you spoke a little bit, you've mentioned actually a few times data sets, and I was just wondering if you could explain and expand upon what a data set is and why it's important for each AI.
So the class of tools we're talking about here, the larger language models, are trained on a large corpus of data. And initially, there was a race between the large language model vendors to, find the bigger, better, largest amount of data. Typically, it's aspects of the public web, Wikipedia, and Google Books, and each of the different large language models have, cut that up differently. So that's the primary data set. But then equally within applications of public relations, you could be using your own private data set, which within an organization could be things like customer reviews, customer complaints. It could be, a body of your body of knowledge within the organization related to white papers, manuals, documents that you've covered. So, it depends on whether it's a public large language model or it's a private data set that you're building yourself.
Right. And, I think it's interesting. I'm going to do a very small amount of self-promotion here, but, one of the things that we've found out at Propel is that because we're anonymizing over 5 million pitches sent through the platform, our data set has, a lot of PR specific data. So we're able to, incorporate that into our different language models that we also use and that we incorporate into Propel itself. And I think that, I think that's important to consider, not only for PR, but, just in general, how is a data set created? And, this is a question to you, Stephen. Why do you think it's important to know how a data set is created and where the data came from, just in AI in general, and in generative AI specifically?
So you're making decisions and creating content based on a corpus of data, generative by its very nature. It's important to understand what that original data is. If you don't, and these issues are being considered at the moment, from a legal perspective, from a copyright perspective, um, you know, you have no idea about the authenticity or the veracity of that content necessarily, and those are important factors. And you know, we're still very much at the early stages of this. There isn't, well, we've seen the first regulation or attempt at regulation legislation come out of the EU last week, you know, relating to original work, reuse of work, and how models are trained. And you know, these issues related to IP, authenticity, and veracity. You know, you can't provide any assurances unless you know the origins of your data set. You know, we had the situation last week when publicly the CTO of OpenAI said, you know, they weren't sure what the basis was of the data set that OpenAI had been trained on. Ergo, there's no way they can, you know, they can provide any guarantees or assurances about future claims against that data set.
So, you know, I've also heard, and we mentioned earlier in the webinar, something about black boxes in AI. Would this be considered part of the black box, or and if not, what is a black box? Why is that important to understand what it is?
So a black box is where there's no transparency. You can't see, you know, you put something in, you get something out. Or in the case of a large language model, in the case of OpenAI, ChatGPT, you get something out. You don't know what the inputs are to that necessarily. So you have no degree of confidence about the traceability or of that, the referencing, the ownership of the original IP. You know, and these are things that are being tested within courts around the world at the moment, particularly in the US, where authors are making claims about their material, their content being used unbeknown to train data sets. You know, it's a hugely challenging area.
Yeah, now I actually remember watching a John Oliver last week tonight episode. I think it was a year and a half ago, where he said, "Why can't he said the U.S. government should mandate that the black boxes be open." Is that even possible? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does make sense if you could, but the OpenAI, the CTO, the statement they made by the OpenAI CTO last week says you know, they're too far along the line, too far down the line to be able to do that, to you know, to start over again. You know, the models are too, in the case of OpenAI, already too developed to be able to do that.
Interesting. So let's go back to, you know, data sets again. And, you know, you just said the CTO doesn't really know what's in his. So, I mean, first of all, is there such thing as a good data set and a bad data set? Like, how do you determine that? And what would typify good and what would typify bad?
Well, so at some point, if you're using there's two classes here on there. There's the class of a data set within an organization, within an enterprise that you build yourself within the ground rails and control, where you do, you know, you've addressed all these issues. It's interesting. Adobe, for example, has its own suite of tools, AI tools for creating images and generative images. And has provided certain guarantees to underwrite any future claims on copyright, because it's confident that it has trained those tools on copyright-free images, stock images, or images that are free of copyright, that are a certain age and so forth. So it's able to make those guarantees because it knows what the origin of its content is and the way the models have been trained. In the case of OpenAI, it doesn't. If you're talking to, you know, a case where you're building, as you talk to Propel, where you're building a data set based on pictures, you know, and you have permission to do that, then, you know, again, you have ownership and veracity of that data, and you know where it's come from.
Right. No, that's definitely it. And we're just let everyone know we do anonymize and aggregate everything. All these pitches that are going through the platform. So we can't read anything, but we do have the ability, and that's how we get our quarterly data reports. That's how we're able to see, okay, this is the best number of words to pitch someone. This is the the best number of words in a subject line when you're pitching out. That's how we're able to aggregate and anonymize all of that data. Now, I have one last question on data sets, and let's take a step back from the copyright part and more into the tech part. Let's say you have a bad data set or a good data set. How would that affect the actual operation of the AI that you're using? And how do I know what question and what types of questions can I ask in order to make sure that the data set for the AI that I'm going to be using is actually going to work for me and actually be a good AI, if you will.
That's hugely contextual and cultural, and what's good and bad. It depends on your own term of reference and the environment in which you operate. And I've highlighted some of the issues that are already being acknowledged within the industry. I think that's probably too abstract of a question necessarily for us to be considering within public relations practice per se, from a practitioner perspective. What I would say is, when we use these tools, the first thing I say to anyone before you even consider the veracity of the data is, do you trust it from a data privacy, data protection point of view, and how your data is used? I think that's the first bar you need to pass. The second bar, then I think we're only just beginning to learn about, and it's so cultural and contextual.
That's I really like that answer because when I'm thinking about AI, I think it's just numbers. I think it's just an algorithm. It's just a computer. How can there be any cultural, contextual, anything to that? So that's actually going to lead us to our next subject, DE&I and AI. And why? Like, how is this even an issue? How is this something that we need to think about? I thought that it's a computer. How can it possibly be biased?
So my use case, best example for this is voice recognition technology that's been around for in our homes for 5 or 10 years, and the devices we have around the homes. And I don't want to trigger anyone's at the moment, but when you give a command and ask it to do something, it will respond very differently to dialect, to gender. And I didn't believe this initially. I thought it was my partner just raging at the machine, literally. But actually, it's been proved by science. And the issue is these data sets all originate, or largely the data sets we're talking about, originate in the Western Hemisphere. The majority are coded on the West Coast of California by men who are of a certain generation, and you can see already, you're building in issues. You're building in issues here, yeah.
So, can you give a few examples of what are some of the issues that maybe you've personally seen, or something that you're like, oh, this clearly points to who was coding it,
Well, we saw we've seen Gemini. Google's cluster tools get called out because there's this awful term become into pass where called ahistoric, where you ask the tool to generate something, an image from history that clearly is inappropriate, but it doesn't care, it'll do it because it has no guardrails and it has a data set that has a particular bias to it. We saw this issue around, and you get it with every class of new technology where they aren't trained properly. The guide rails aren't put in place. Where they'll make judgments on imagery and make very different classifications or decisions based on how someone looks, the skin tones, and the hair and so forth.
So what are some things that you can maybe ask a company or even do your own research for to figure out if the data set that you're using or even the AI that you're using is going to be, more even across the board and basically have that ideal that I had, which is this is a computer. It can't, it's an algorithm. It can't, it shouldn't be biased one way or another for anything. So how are there any ways even to kind of determine that before you start using a generative AI software?
No, I think the beauty of this class of technology is they are being used. They are being tested by large populations, and so issues very quickly emerge. People want to test the edge cases naturally. There isn't any sort of test though that will there isn't any sort of general or standard test for the issues we're describing. But you see it whenever a new tool is launched. People will try and get it to commit crimes, to help design a weapon or and so forth. It's human nature to want to try and break these things. Problem is that we are working at edge cases where where the guardrails aren't put in place, and this is why we had this ridiculous situation when Elon Musk, of all people, Elon Musk said, about 6 to 12 months ago, we need to stop this all now. We need 6 months to get the governance in place and to put rules in place for these types of technologies before they're let out into the wild.
Right. So first of all, I don't think either of us condone using a generative AI to make a weapon of any sort. So let's just make sure that we have that, recorded. But let's shift over a little bit to more of the PR side of things. So I think that something interesting that I've seen a little bit of is using generative AI to kind of help you to pitch different cultures. If you're sitting in the United States, for instance, the way that you pitch someone in Mexico might be different than how you pitch them in Spain, might be different than how you pitch them in Argentina. Same thing goes for different parts of Africa, different parts of Asia. And I was wondering, I think we touched on this a little bit previously, but from a PR perspective, what are some of the issues that you've seen surrounding AI and cultural references?
You make a very good point, actually. If the data set has been trained on content from these different markets, then naturally we'll be able to support practitioners in tailoring pitches. And you make some very good examples. There is a level of formality in working within some markets, thinking in African markets. Now, there's a level of formality in how you will pitch the media compared with, say, the UK or the US. You're totally reliant on your data set. If the data set ChatGPT doesn't cover, it hasn't been trained on data from the market, then it's useless, next to useless, and they'll probably tell you the wrong thing. We haven't really talked about hallucination, but these machines want to provide answers and not necessarily the right ones. Haven't got access to the data. If, on the other hand, as you described, you have a data set that's based on content from different markets, and you're confident of the veracity of that, then yeah, you can be confident the output's going to be much better.
Actually, I think this would be a great time to talk about hallucinations. Thanks for bringing it up. So first of all, can you explain what a hallucination is and what that means in the context of what you just said, vis-a-vis pitching someone in a different cultural environment than you are, person?
Yeah, so you've got to remember at the moment, most of the large language models are the dominant ones are based on Western, mainly Anglo-Saxon content, majority of it English. So yeah, straight away there's inbuilt issues with all of this. A machine wants to. Sorry. Let's wind back a bit. Sorry. Artificial intelligence is very much artificial from a large language perspective. It's based on pattern recognition, so it's trained on a large amount of data, and it's looking to extract patterns from that data and predict what the next word or phrase might be in a sequence. So if it has a large amount of data around a certain issue, market, topic, or so forth, it's likely that prediction is going to be accurate. Equally, if it doesn't, it could complete nonsense. And I've lots of examples. Go and ask it to create a biography for yourself, and if you've got a profile on Wikipedia or Amazon or Google Scholar, for example, it might get the first 2 paragraphs right. More than likely, it will make it up completely, and it'll be complete fiction. So if you apply that in a public relations context, and you think about pitching, or you think about generating any content, you have to be confident that it has the corpus data to train the system.
Right. And, I think something that also is a little bit overlooked in this is, with all these new generative AI tools, we're saving time. We're saving so much time. So take some of that time, 35 seconds of your time that you just saved. Maybe you saved an hour. Take 35 seconds of it. Make sure that everything that's written there is correct. Make sure that, that everything that's written there makes sense. I think that, this is something that I feel is really important to harp on is generative AI provides drafts. It doesn't provide the final product. It's up to you as the PR practitioner at the end of the day to make sure that everything makes sense and everything is accurate. Generative AI gets you 60% of the way there, 70% of the way there, but it's up to you to really fill in those gaps and make it perfect. So, that's I think going to be one of the, one of the main issues that I think people have right now, and one of the things that they're afraid of when it comes to adopting generative AI is that, well, maybe it won't 100% work. Maybe these hallucinations are going to get me in real big trouble. I mean, I think we've all heard of the story of the lawyer who wrote a deposition using generative AI, and it turns out that half of the cases that it was using were fake. These hallucinations. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about now, just like how, there are some issues that people believe there are with generative AI. There are some issues with generative AI that are keeping people from adopting them. And I wanted to hear what you thought the biggest issues were, Stephen, for people to make that jump into adopting generative AI.
I mean, we could. Sorry, but your final part, I just want to emphasize that it creates a very good draft of anything. Literally, from go ask it to suggest a recipe for your lunch or your dinner, or ask it and draft a crisis plan. It will provide the first draft of anything. But it really does need human intervention. One of my concerns at the moment is you see LinkedIn pumped full of content that clearly is being produced by AI, and so it's really, really important that human factor is brought to bear. The biggest hesitation at the moment is as we've talked about here. There's so much uncertainty within the market. There's a lot of hype. I think we're right. There's that Gartner curve that shows the adoption of technology. I mean, we're right at the top of the hype cycle at the moment. And people are just completely overwhelmed about where to use this technology, where to apply it. It's not helped by so much uncertainty related to the governance aspect. So we talked about hallucination, we talked about veracity and authenticity, we've talked about data privacy and data management. These are all governance issues. I think the first thing any organization has to do, from a PR perspective, whether you're agency or in-house, is to create a governance framework to say, what the rules of the road are. Just as we did it with social media 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Who can do what, within what context, how do you deal with confidential information, and so forth. And that's the first thing. Second thing is where you apply it within your workflow. And there's a range of solutions there. I talked about the two main philosophies or strategic approaches, and that's deconstructing workflow and looking for tools to build within your workflow, or the other one, putting it on the desk of everybody within an organization and letting them apply it themselves within their own workflow from a large language model perspective. And that's the main two solutions. But yeah, fundamentally, there's a whole load of governance issues we need to figure out, and we need to figure out where and how to apply it within our workflow.
What are some of the examples, like concrete examples of governance that you've seen work for organizations when it comes to using generative AI? When it comes, when PR pros are using it, what are some of the things that are either recommended or that you've seen work?
So the PR, there's a couple of really good examples. PR Council in the US came to market very early with a set of guidelines based on its ethics framework. I'd encourage people to go and look at that. The University of Cambridge in the UK, their in-house team published a set of guidelines that work really well. That cover many of these issues, and I think it's by all means go and look out into the market and figure out what works for you. But we've described the main points where you need to be thinking about policy within your organization: data privacy, copyright, veracity, guidelines, and then use cases. So there's sort of 4 or 5 headlines then need to build policy around. And as I say, the University of Cambridge PR Council, there's others as well, have built some good exemplars that they've shared publicly and published that you can use.
Right, definitely. And I highly recommend everyone check those out as well. I've read them as well, and I really think that they have some great ideas. Something that also, I wanted to talk a little bit about privacy, because that's, obviously something that is really concerning to a lot of PR pros. We're dealing with confidential information from our organizations, and putting that into ChatGPT or into some sort of generative AI model can be a little scary.
It's not scary. It's just, I think there's a March 2023, Samsung had a massive code breach because engineers did exactly what you described, cut and pasted code into ChatGPT to check it, and suddenly they found that served up to that same code served up to someone else. Then check how these. I said it, early on in the conversation. Check how these tools are using your data, whether they're retraining their models on your data, and how that data is being shared. Because just cutting and pasting content into a web browser is stupid.
100%, 100%. And you should be able to. What I recommend everyone to do when they're using a generative AI product is to go into the privacy policy, see what's there, see what it is, see what's happening. I think that's really important to do.
I keep looking at these and scrutinize them because there's a load of hype in the industry. Everyone, everyone wants to lean in and use these tools and see where they can use them. But the first issue is, that data management and data privacy policy. And if you use ChatGPT, a commercial version of ChatGPT, and you screw down the privacy, then you're okay. Equally, if you use the ChatGPT or the tools that are now built into the Microsoft Office 360 suite, you've got that level of surety. But first question you should ask always.
Oh, for sure. And I think, I mean, there's some really simple ways to maintain your privacy, or your data security. And one of them is really simple. It kind of sounds like a sixth grader pretending to be a spy. Use code words instead of using the actual name of your organization. You could use X or a code word. And instead of
Mm.
saying the actual number of, let's say, funding or who the investors are, you can just use different code words for that. So what you're going to get spit out, the output that you're going to get, you're still going to use it. You just have to change all the names around to what they actually are. I mean, that way you don't even have to. That's just a very simple way to think about preventing a privacy leak. And Stephen, do you have any other examples or tricks to kind of prevent these leaks or to be
Yeah,
careful about
sorry. I'm
AI?
afraid I'm a paranoid. I'm totally paranoid from the days of working early in the web about data privacy, and I wouldn't even do that.
Interesting. What would you do?
Yeah, I'm afraid. Say again.
What would you do?
I do what I'd use the tool that provided data security and privacy. I just wouldn't use them in that sort of application. I got called out speaking on a crisis conference recently about using AI in crisis, and got to be very careful about the use cases, because first of all, what's the data management and privacy, and doesn't matter whether you agree or not with the privacy at a moment in time. It's, do you trust that vendor? Because as we've seen, software vendors, with the greatest respect, do change the rules as right along the way. So you trust with your vendor is a critical issue.
Oh, for sure. I mean, 100%. So I think my question is more geared towards, let's say you trust your vendor. Okay. What would you do in that situation? Assuming that you trust them, that you believe that their privacy and that their security is up to par. How would you, go about using this technology in a safe way?
If it's you get your governance in place, the rules of the road, the governance framework, whatever you want to describe it, and we've pointed to some good examples that people can go and look at, and then I think you perfectly safe to use it in a workplace environment. It does come down to those critical aspects, though. And I've got these tools open on. I constantly use Otter AI, and I constantly use ChatGPT in a secure lockdown version all the time for testing headlines, helping with writing. Also used all the time with transcription and extraction, and things like Grammarly use all the time to help me improve writing. We almost don't think about it anymore.
Yeah, definitely. So I have one last question for you, Stephen, and then I'm going to open it up to the question and answers for everyone else. So I kind of wanted to get back into ethical AI and ethical guidelines. What does that mean? How can we as PR practitioners think about that, and how it impacts us in our workflows as well?
From what perspective? What do you mean?
So, when I'm looking at an AI, you're speaking a lot about, the AI taking the information that I am inputting it into it, and then using that to really using it to train itself, which some people might consider ethical, some people might not. What are some of the first of all, what is ethical AI, and what are some of the ethical AI guidelines? How can we even think about AI ethics at all if we're talking about a computer? What does that mean in practice is the very first question. Then I'll get to the second question next.
Yeah, so it's hugely challenging because we've covered a lot of ground here today during this discussion, and presumably practitioners on a call today are members of the CIPR or PR SA or IABC and ascribe to a professional code of conduct. And if you do, it covers issues like governance, transparency, disclosure, privacy, and so forth. And so you've got to think about all those aspects within your use of AI. I don't think this is a particular, it's a new tool, but it's just another use case that we have to think about within that framework, and that's why the governance of this is so important.
Right, definitely. And so what are some of the, can you talk a little bit about the CIPR guidelines and how they might differ from the UK guidelines, and how that might differ from maybe ways that, ways that people who might be unethical are using the AI currently,
We spent much of this call addressing, speaking from an ethical perspective, right? In everything that I say. I certainly hope that practitioners on the board today will be applying these technologies ethically. If you consider and we think about how they could be misapplied, then that's a huge concern. Especially, I've said this a number of times and written about it. The number of elections we have around the world coming up this year, and the potential for these technologies to create large amounts of content at scale that you could then pump out via social media networks, is a concern, and there's no guardrails around that. So those types of applications do worry me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So amazing. Well, thank you for sharing your insights on that. I was wondering, does anyone in the so now we're going to take a few questions from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to send them over. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how all of these things that we've been talking about just for so long are applied to AI, be it DE&I, be it ethics, be it governance. How are we going to be taking our own industry and incorporating this brand new technology into it? When the internet came, I think that, you might remember it better than I do, but it seems that the people who really succeeded are the ones who adapted to this game-changing technology versus sitting on the sidelines. They use the internet as another tool in the toolbox as opposed to sitting on the sidelines. Oh, so Aaliyah asked, will the recorded Zoom be sent to us? Yes, it will.
So you make a good point, actually, that it's often said, and there's been a load of discussion and discourse within management about AI taking jobs and overtaking human capital, and that's that's a concern, and you can argue that case either way. Actually, I think with every iteration of technology, it creates a new wave of jobs just as it replaces jobs, and I think that's already happening here. So that's a potential concern, but I think it's mitigated by the opportunity, and the opportunity, frankly, is tremendous. And I don't think your job's going to be taken by AI, but it might be taken by a practitioner who's using AI. And just as the practitioners that got ahead during the late 90s, I'm old enough to remember that, in practice were the ones who jumped on email as a means of pitching and form of workflow, were ones that got ahead. Likewise, within the social media era, the 2008 to 2012, they were the ones that went into that and understand the mix of paid and shared and owned media. I think the same's happening again. It's just another wave of opportunity that creates potential for us.
100%. Well, on that note, I'm good. I think this is a perfect way to end on a very positive note about how we're going to be using AI going into the future and how to think about AI. Oh, sorry. So we have one quick question. What does it actually mean to train AI? Is it providing the tool with a broad range of data, then asking it to use the data in a variety of tasks, or is there something else involved? So do you want to take this one for the last 30 seconds?
So there's two perspectives to this. It's when a tool like OpenAI is trained on large corpus of data, it simulates that data and it spots the trends in it. There's actually you go on the OpenAI website, there's some very good infographics that show how this is done. when and when it's trained on your own data, so you use a tool like OpenAI at an abstract level, it goes through a series of processes to do the same, to parse that data, to ingest it and understand it.
Right. And again, you can use a technique called fine tuning as well. So that's kind of putting up, if you will, well, the word isn't guardrails, because guardrails might mean something a little bit different in the world of AI, but fine tuning, you're kind of putting up these certain parameters to make sure that the data is being used in a certain way. And that's another way to also train AI is by using that as well. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot involved, and I think Stephen and I can talk about this for another hour if we really wanted to.
It's been a great session. Thanks very much. And yeah, let's catch up again in another 6 months, because it will all change. That's the only thing I can guarantee.
100%. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us on the webinar. If anyone wants to reach out to you or have any questions, is there any way that they could do that? Email, anything you'd like to promote yourself as well?
Go and find me on LinkedIn. I use Twitter very intermittently. I've completely fallen out with it since Elon Musk took over. I'm now on LinkedIn firmly a Microsoft fanboy, so go and find me there.
Awesome. All right, amazing. And as always, you can reach me at aton@propelmypr.com. Once again, everyone, thank you so much. No matter where you are in the world, have a great evening, afternoon, or morning. Stephen, thanks so much again. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
I know.